I'd like to introduce Julie Diaz from the United States. Julie is from New Jersey, and she takes LDN for Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Thank you for joining me, Julie.
My pleasure.
Could you tell us when you first started to notice you had health issues?
It was after the birth of my second son. It's hard to really figure it out because I don't know at what point it became the thyroid, but I started having symptoms as early as 30 after the birth of my first son, when I started experiencing some fatigue and constipation and eczema. And then after the birth of my second son, I was getting the flu a lot. I was exhausted. My hair dried up to a crispy state. I had never seen it that way before. I'd wake up and it would be just all over the place, just in a big ball of crispiness. So that was alarming. But even worse was that I was still constipated, and that went on for 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah, that was horrible because I felt like I had a lot of toxins building up, and I study health, so I knew that I was toxic, and I was trying to do colon cleanses. I went for colonics. I did some detox products. I tried chelation at one point, and I had a terrible reaction, and I stopped, and I didn't go back to it again for years. But I definitely turned out to be toxic with metals, 4 different metals, which can contribute to Hashimoto's.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're not eliminating properly, I mean, that makes it even worse. But I eventually found out that I had an MTHFR gene mutation as well, which also further hinders your body's ability to detoxify. So eventually I figured all of this out, but I didn't know. I kept going to different doctors. I counted about 12 different physicians. That never helped me. I told them what my symptoms were. I told them what my theory was. I thought my thyroid was not well, and they kept telling me I was fine. And my T3 was low, but it was still in the range. But just being in the low part of the range is enough to give you a lot of symptoms. And they just didn't test my antibodies until much, much later. So the antibody test came in 2012. So at that point, I was already into my 40s. I was, I think, 43, 44, I don't know. And then the doctor didn't even tell me my diagnosis. The endocrinologist was writing something down and was going over my lab results. And I said, well, what is that? And she said, consistent with Hashimoto's. And I said, okay, so you're telling me I have Hashimoto's? She didn't even confirm or deny. It was a very strange experience. I've been very disappointed with endocrinologists, and I haven't been able to find one to prescribe LDN. Even after taking it and telling an endocrinologist that it helped, they still wouldn't prescribe it or even express interest in learning about it.
Goodness. So when did you actually manage to obtain LDN?
So I finally managed to get it after searching. Well, I first learned about it thanks to Dr. Mercola. Love Dr. Mercola. So I said, why didn't I think of this before? After suffering for years, I went on Mercola.com, searched Hashimoto's, and there was the answer, LDN. I read all about it, everything I could find, and I started asking my doctors, and no, the answer was no. So I looked online, and I found a neurologist that used it for MS. So I went to the neurologist, and he didn't treat anybody with Hashimoto's. He was hesitant to prescribe. But I said, please let me be your guinea pig and let me try this. And I had brought the whole packet of information from low-dose-naltrexone.org. And he already knew about it, but he did look at the packet a little bit. And he agreed as long as I didn't go out there, telling everyone. I wasn't allowed to, use his name. So I said, of course. And it just happened within the next month I found another doctor who was a general physician to prescribe him. He's an osteopath, a DO. So now that's who I go through. I I didn't want to keep going back to the neurologist. He was kind of far. So I found a doctor locally, thank God. And that was about maybe 10 months ago. About 8 to 10 months ago, I started on LDN, 3 milligrams.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt the difference immediately. The first day, I took a pill at night, and I woke up more alert, more perky. I felt like I was in a better mood, and I had more energy right away. I was happy. And it wasn't like, a 0 to 100. It was just a noticeable small difference.
Mm-hmm.
But over time, I just continued to feel better. I still have days where, I don't feel as good, but it's probably, based on my diet. I'm not always perfect with that. But my antibodies have gone down. My antibodies were, these are the TPO antibodies, which indicate you have Hashimoto's. Mm-hmm. They went down from 114 to 27 after about. So the proof is in the pudding.
Definitely. Oh, that is amazing. If we had to say your quality of life before LDN on a score of 1 to 10, and 10 being the best, what would it have been?
Before LDN?
Yes.
Well, oh geez, I hadn't thought about that. Maybe a 6.
Okay. And what would you say it is now?
I would say an 8. But keep in mind that before I started LDN, I had made a lot of other changes. Mm-hmm. I had gone to school to be a health coach, and I learned a lot of things. So I chelated out the metals. I stopped eating gluten. I cut down on dairy. I stopped eating soy and a lot of other allergens foods I'm allergic to. Mm-hmm. And I started taking some really great supplements and drinking these superfood smoothies. So I had already come up, my quality of life had already risen before I started the LDN.
Okay.
So let's say before all that, I was probably at a 2.
Really? Goodness.
I felt terrible. No strength. I think my adrenals were shot, which no doctor ever tells you. Mm-hmm. And
it just goes to show, doesn't it, that what can be done with changing your diet and your lifestyle.
Exactly. It's just made a world of difference. I was also depressed. I had anxiety. I used to dread going to work. And, stressful situations can bring on Hashimoto's. If you're genetically disposed to having thyroid problems and you become toxic with metals or you have a leaky gut, which a lot of us have, and then something stressful happens, that's the point where all of a sudden you're exhausted, you're on the floor, you have no strength, you're depressed, and you feel horrible, and that's when a lot of people end up going to the doctor and finding out they have it. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of things that lead up to it, and then there's a lot of steps to get out of it, and it really works. You can go, according to my labs, I'm in remission because 0 to 35 result is positive, considered okay, and I'm last tested I was 27, so I consider myself in remission.
And what is your hair like these days?
My hair is long and it's healthy. It's not crinkled up and dry anymore.
Mm-hmm. And what about your bowels?
I move regularly, more than once a day. They say 2 to 3 times is optimal, and some days it is 3. It's usually 2. So. And I never have a problem, and I don't have to take any colon cleanse capsules anymore, so I'm very happy.
So what would you say to other people who have Hashimoto's if they're contemplating trying LDN? What would your advice to them be?
I would advise them to work with, there's a lot of health coaches out there, including you, who have Hashimoto's. So many women have Hashimoto's. And you may be exhausted, but don't ever give up, because if you take one step at a time, the first step is definitely working on your diet, including superfoods and eliminating gluten. It's a hard thing to do, I know. There's controversy about it, but according to the top thyroid experts on all the thyroid summits and conferences that I've listened to, it's an absolute must, because the thyroid cells and gluten cells look the same. So when you eat it, your immune system is attacking the gluten and your thyroid.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me, I'm out of breath a little bit because I came up the stairs. I'm sorry. But it's very important. There's a lot of food allergies, and soy is also very harmful to the thyroid. So if you start making these simple changes, even if it's really hard for you to just cut down, just start eating less of it. And because sometimes changes are hard to do, and some people can't do it overnight, and that's okay. But if you start replacing those foods with some really healthy superfoods, and putting more greens and vegetables into your diet and healthy oils, which is very important, and getting the right amount of minerals, because a lot of us with Hashimotos, it slows everything down. It slows down not only your thyroid and your metabolism, but it slows down your digestion, and it makes it harder to absorb nutrients. And a lot of us have nutrient deficiencies like magnesium and zinc. And vitamin D is a big one. You got to get your vitamin D levels up to around 70 or 80 is optimal. If your doctor says, oh, your vitamin D is 40 and it's fine, it's not fine. It needs to be higher. Mine was at 40, and luckily I had an integrative MD who recommended I double up from 5,000 to 10,000 units a day, which brought me up to 70. And I feel a world of difference. Less anxiety, less depression. I just feel great.
Well, that's wonderful. Okay. Thank you very much for sharing your experience with us.
Well, thank you for having me. It's my pleasure, and I love to help people that have this issue. It brings joy to my life, working with clients that have thyroid issues.
Thank you.